Good afternoon, Mr. Sam Achampong, who is basically the Regional Director of CIPS, and we welcome you today in our IPSC.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
Great event. Really enjoying it.
Thank you very much. I mean, we definitely wanted to gain more of your knowledge and experience to share with us through our media and knowledge. So we will start immediately about what is your opinion about how can procurement transitional to a strategic functional activity?
Well, I think there's two aspects. The first aspect sits with us as procurement professionals. And I think it sits with education. Okay, we need to educate ourselves on what does it mean to be a strategic function. How do we translate what we know from a functional perspective, terms such as SRM, category management? How do we translate that into business language? Okay, because once you come out of the procurement sphere, people want to hear the business language. What is the impact on the organization? So I think from an educational perspective, we need to learn how to translate our knowledge into a business language so people understand the business impacts we can make. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is that, look, the core skills of a procurement leader in this day and age are non-technical. They are soft skills. And the number one soft skill is influencing skills. Okay? So the best leaders in procurement have the ability to influence at a high level. So to turn procurement from being transactional into effective, we need to be able to influence the C-suite to allow us to implement the strategies or the business outcomes that we recommend, and at that point will be valued as a core business function.
Well, you got me there. I think I suddenly have something I wanted you to clarify for me as well. What about technical certifications? How exactly those certificates add value to the professions in their day-to-day work?
Well, I think they're absolutely fundamental. I think you cannot call yourself a procurement professional unless you have proved yourself to be professional at something. So every profession has a benchmark, has a license to practice. You can't just decide one day that you're very good at Excel spreadsheets and call yourself an accountant. You can't suddenly decide you have a knowledge of law and call yourself a lawyer. You have to have done something. So the clear thing is that certifications or even wider qualifications, more importantly, and there is a distinction between certifications and qualifications.
Yes.
Qualifications are fundamental. So to have those, that's what makes you a professional. Otherwise, you're an amateur. Okay, because you need to validate your credentials in a uniform way. So I think they're absolutely fundamental, because apart from anything else, as a working professional, you don't know what you don't know. So unless you've actually been through the fundamentals of that particular profession and taken in that knowledge, and your knowledge has been tested, then you don't know what you don't know. Working for 20 years in a function in a particular company does not mean you are proficient at that profession. It just means you've spent a lot of years in it. So in answer to your question, I think qualifications are fundamental to calling yourself a professional.
Amazing. I like the way you basically put it on. I mean, it's really something different. Then how do industry clarification transform procurement capability in the global market? I mean, now let's just open up to the global market. We know there is a lot of diversity in terms of methodology and thinking and principles. And we know very well there is a lot of challenges imposed to the business. How, again, industry clarification transform procurement capability globally in the global market?
It's a great question. And of course, when you're talking about the globe, then that's going to vary. It's going to vary significantly. But you're right. When you talk about procurement and supply chain, there are clusters of how things are done in a similar way. So automotive, great. Yeah. It's a great, it's a great center of excellence for procurement in terms of just-in-time supply chain methodologies and manufacturing methodologies. Correct. FMCG on a global scale works very similarly. Medical works very similarly. Oil and gas probably works very similarly. So how do you adapt your strategies? I'll go back to your first question about education. you need a foundation in whatever profession you're in. And in the professional procurement, what you learn when you become a professional is fundamentally what you're looking to do as a procurement professional is to procure those goods and services while achieving the lowest total cost of ownership. Okay, lowest total cost of ownership. So the crux here is what you're doing in whatever industry you're in is changing the factors that make up the lowest total cost of ownership. So if you're procuring medical equipment, then you can't really afford to run out of stock of key medical equipment. So there's a higher weighting on the logistics element, on the storage element. You can't implement just-in-time technologies if you're doing medical equipment because you cannot afford to run out. Okay, so your strategies will be based on the category, and because you're a professional and you know that total cost of ownership means different things to different industries. It's not just price. As I said, in the case of medical, you cannot run out of this commodity. So price will come second to availability. You may be happy to have a stock of a particular equipment, a latent stock, even though it's costing you money because availability is more important. If you're in a marketing category, then you know that the important thing in marketing is speed to market. So you can't afford to do a tender for 3 months because that implies lowest total cost of ownership. So I think that globally there are similarities. You have the foundation with your education. You apply it to the category, and then you apply the local context. And the local context is if you're in, let's say, Saudi Arabia, and there is a big push for local content, which is involving local suppliers, then you make sure that is very highly weighted in your evaluation and selection criteria. So that's how you flex your procurement skill.
One simple question: how to use or how to utilize this kind of knowledge that you're talking about or experience in the current scenario, looking at the crisis, I would say, or maybe the geopolitical events right now happening currently while we are talking. So amazingly, I met many of the people today. They were all talking about the challenges. And every one of them has said, Mozzamil, we have gone through an educational process. And amazingly, I mentioned again, hey, this doesn't mean you are certified to be a professional. But let's talk about those who's actually a professional. How to survive such scenarios currently?
It's a great question, and just to again peg back a little bit to clarify certain things about being a professional. Being a professional means you have obtained that license to practice. Okay, so there has to be a set criteria in which you become licensed to practice a profession. As it turns out in procurement, we consider CIPS to be the license to practice. Okay, so if you're in karate, you get a black belt, and we would equalize that. But the analogy is this: if you're practicing karate and you become a black belt, it means you have a black belt. It doesn't mean you're ready to challenge Bruce Lee, does it? Okay.
Yeah.
It means you have learned everything you need to learn, and now you get the experience. Okay. So the certification itself doesn't mean you're the finished article. You get your experience. Now, in terms of current events, and I guess we're talking about geopolitics and tariffs, I think it's again, you would use the experience you've gained in business, but you'd also use key principles. And if you look at tariffs are at the moment, well, today, it could change tomorrow, are affecting pretty much everyone. Okay. So no one can be, holier than thou and say, well, I told you to do this. I told you not to trade with China. I told you, because everyone's affected. So and the same, by the way, was what happened in COVID, because people would say, well, COVID has happened, supply chains are shut down in this part of the world, but actually they were shut down everywhere. So you couldn't mitigate against it. But one of the key principles around procurement is you need to mitigate your risk. You could never have all your eggs in one basket. So if you take COVID, yes, if you had one source of supply for your goods, let's say you're getting from Mexico, and Mexico had an issue due to COVID, and you suddenly had to shut down your entire business, that's because you didn't diversify. You should have had Mexico, China, US, perhaps, right? So you've diversified. And the same goes for tariffs. Basically, yes, certain countries are going to be hit by tariffs. You should have diversified your supply. Now, during COVID, the whole world was affected. So your strategy of diversifying has no meaning at that point. But as you come out of COVID, you're able to recover quicker because you have a diversified supply, right? Yeah. So, and those are the principles that we learn in procurement anyway. You need to have an exit strategy. You need to have a disaster recovery strategy. You need to think through if this factory in Mexico burnt down, what would happen? I can't have all of my key commodities in that one factory, because if it burnt down, that's the end of my business. You have to have a mitigating strategy. So I think as long as you have disaster planning against different business scenarios, because you can never guess what those scenarios are going to be. But as long as you have disaster planning, then you're able to recover from those shocks, even if they're as comprehensive as tariffs or COVID, a lot quicker than your competitors.
Finally, I wanted to ask you one last thing about the advantages of sustainability, digitization, artificial intelligence in the supply chain transformation process.
Well, I think artificial intelligence and digitalization are benefits. Yes, clearly, because they are, IT is an enabler. So it's used properly. It enhances our process. It means that human beings are freed from doing the mundane and the kind of number crunching, because the machines do that better. So allow the machines do the work and let the people do the thinking. So while your AI is scanning the numbers, you can scan the horizon, look for risks, look for new strategies. So human beings, with the use of technology, are able to employ their minds in a more strategic way, because they're not bogged down with transactional tasks. So that's good. So what are the benefits of IT? The benefits of IT are making our process a lot more efficient to enable us to be more innovative, a lot more thought-led. Sustainability is a different thing. I think sustainability is not, as a subject, is not something that necessarily enhances procurement. It produces challenges. However, I would always say that the benefits of sustainable or ESG thinking are, it's fundamental, away from the subjects, it's fundamental to human thought. Clearly, we need to live in a sustainable way, and procurement's input to that is making sure that when we're obtaining goods and services, we do it adhering to sustainable principles. When we're procuring something, we're making sure that we are getting the best value from a monetary perspective. So therefore we're not affecting our bottom line monetarily, but we're also not diminishing the planet. So we shouldn't really, within our calculation, we shouldn't be planning to buy something that's going to go to landfill, for example.
Yes,
that's deliberate. We shouldn't be buying things when we know that the source is from a place where human beings are being exploited. We should take that into account. So people, planet, profit is real, and also, I think that we shouldn't assume that if you take environmental considerations into account, it's going to cost more money to us from a monetary point of view. I think we need to be a little bit smarter than that and look a lot more long term for your ROI, and say, actually, does it cost more? Does an electric car cost more than a petrol car? Yes, but what time horizon are you taking the life cycle over? And does it really cost that, or are you just looking at this year's budget?
Sam, thank you very much. It was a great pleasure talking to you first, and I mean, even myself, I'm looking forward to meet you again and again, to listen to you a little bit more.